government funding and raising the debt limit has exposed not only the split between Republicans and Democrats, but also a bitter divide inside the GOP. And that internal battle may determine how this standoff ends. Joining me here in Washington, Georgia Congressman Tom Graves, who is demanding changes in Obamacare as part of any deal. And in New York, Congressman Pete King, who says some Republicans are now looking for a way out of the shutdown. Before we get to the shutdown discussion, Congressman King, as a member of House Intel and the House Homeland Security Committee, I want to ask you about these two raids yesterday, commando raids inside Africa, one in Tripoli, one in Somalia. Two questions. First, did we kill the al-Shabaab leader we were targeting in Somalia? And secondly, should the al-Qaeda operative that we caught in Tripoli, should he be tried in civilian court in New York, where he is currently under indictment?
Chris, I can't comment on whether or not we captured the al-Shabaab leader in Somalia. Having said that, it was a daring raid. I give our special forces, special operators, tremendous credit. I think we have to, after it is over, find out, did al-Shabaab have any advance notice we were coming? Because obviously there was a heavy resistance when we got there. As far as Libya is concerned, Libya has been wanted for 15 years. I wish he was being tried in Guantanamo rather than the Southern District of New York. And I also raised the question, though, why, if we were able to get al-Libya, we didn't get the operatives from Benghazi, who we know where they are, and they've been almost open and notorious now for quite a while. You know, why we don't go in and get them as well. And that's been a real issue, I know, by a number of us in the Congress, why we don't go after those who carried out Benghazi. But al-Libya is a great capture, and I give our Navy SEALs and our Special Forces and FBI operatives tremendous credit. But again, I hope he's interrogated for a long time before he's brought to court anyway.
All right, let's turn, if we can, to the other subject at hand, which of course is the government shutdown, possible default. Congressman King, let me start with you. You've said some pretty rough things about your fellow Republicans who've been pushing this default. You have called them yahoos, Ted Cruz crazies, even terrorists. With Tom Graves sitting here, it sounds like it's more than just a disagreement over policy.
No, I have a great regard for Tom Graves. I'm talking primarily about Ted Cruz here, who basically was saying that if we defunded Obamacare, he could manage to both keep the government open and defund Obamacare. The fact is, it was done in the House, and the government is now closed, and Obamacare is going forward. This was a strategy that never could have worked. It was almost a sort of nullification to say we're going to shut down the government if we don't defund a law that we don't like. I mean, if we want to defund something, we should repeal it, and we do it by the same way the president got it signed. Elect Republicans to both houses of Congress, repeal it, and then have a Republican president sign it. At this rate, this was a strategy doomed to failure, and Ted Cruz has now walked away from it. Now he's saying we should negotiate on the debt limit, which is what we should have been doing for the last month. That's where the real negotiation is, not on a strategy that was doomed to failure.
Let me bring Congressman Graves into this. You have been one of the people leading the charge to defund or delay Obamacare. First, how do you feel, either whether it was from Congressman King or Congressman Nunez being called a terrorist, a lemming wearing a suicide vest, and what is it that so-called moderates like King and Nunez don't get?
Well, first, let me just say, we as a conference, we're united. We have been working together now over the last couple of weeks. There may be disagreements on strategy or tactics, but we are fully united behind opening the government up as quickly as we can, as well as providing fairness to all of Americans as it relates to Obamacare. And we've been pretty reasonable as we've worked through this process. I've heard the reference to a full delay or a full repeal. That was something I was for. A full defund, likewise, a one-year delay of the entire program, to now just saying, Mr. President, can we not just have one-year delay of the individual mandate and provide the same protections to all of America that you've provided to big business?
So what do you, but you say you're united. There are fellow Republicans who have called you terrorists.
That, as it relations to tactics and strategy, what I'm saying we're united behind is protecting Americans from the harmful effects of Obamacare and keeping the government open. And the votes of the last week demonstrate that clearly.
Well, let's talk about how flexible you are, because there is now some talk among House Republican leaders to pivot away from Obamacare, not to make demands about Obamacare, but instead to focus on the debt and entitlement reform and long-term spending cuts. Would you accept a deal on that, to reopen the government and to raise the debt limit if it did not include any changes to Obamacare?
I don't suspect that's something the conference would embrace right now. We have had a tremendous fight over keeping the government open and protecting Americans from Obamacare. But I'm here to say I'm open to a lot of different ideas. I'm willing to put it all on the table. Let's have a conversation about tax reform, about debt limit, about funding the government, about Obamacare. But in order to do that, Harry Reid has to send some Democrats to meet with us. He can't be scared to send Democrats to meet with Republicans to have this conversation.
You just heard Jack Lew, the Secretary Lew, the Secretary of the Treasury, talking about how catastrophic it would be if we were to default. Are you prepared to refuse to raise the debt limit unless you get what you want on Obamacare?
There's no reason to default. In fact, Republicans don't want to default. We've passed a bill, the full faith and
Forgive
credit.
me, sir, I'm going to do what I did with Secretary Lew. You're not answering my question.
But I'm just saying, there's no reason to default. The president's the only one demanding default right now. He could sign the Full Faith and Credit Act that we've passed out of the House that would prioritize the spending. And I think you've pointed out rightly that there's a lot of revenue coming into the government. They forget to tell you about the $200 billion collected every month by the IRS. Taxes are still being collected. There's still plenty of revenue.
But would you refuse to raise the debt limit over Obamacare?
Right now, we're talking about Obamacare as it relates to opening the government and the continuing resolution. The fact is we have, in relation, 95% of all this we agree on. Let's get that taken care of, and then let's talk about the other 5%.
Congressman King, Democrats are now pushing a discharge petition to take this idea of a clean CR out of committee to bring it to the House floor for a vote. There are 200 Democrats who have agreed to sign that, but they're going to need at least 17 Republicans in the House. Will you support a discharge petition?
No, let me first tell you, I don't consider myself a moderate. I'm a Reagan conservative. Having said that, no, I would not. And by the way, one thing that Tom Graves and I can agree on is that the Democrats, in my mind, are also being irresponsible here. The President of the United States has an obligation to get involved. He's the head of the Democratic Party. He's doing a very good job as that, but he's also the head of the entire country. And I can't picture a Harry Truman or a Lyndon Johnson or a Bill Clinton or a John Kennedy standing on the sidelines while this is going on. He has an obligation to get involved. Whether he calls it negotiations or whatever else he wants to call it, the fact is, if this situation is as serious as he says it is, and I think it is as far as a default on the debt, then he has an absolute obligation as President of the United States to get involved. I think it's irresponsible.
If you could answer, sir, if you could answer my direct question, though, why won't you sign a discharge petition?
It's not going to go anywhere. And also because the Democrats are not bargaining in good faith. You have to get, there's no way in the world you're going to get 25 Republicans to go on that. And having said that, I wouldn't go on it because they are, as I say, not bargaining in good faith here right now. I am committed to making this work. That's why I've been against this government shutdown from the start. And where I disagree with Tom is we are the ones who did shut the government down. Charles Krauthammer called it the suicide caucus. I mean, Wall Street Journal said they were kamikazes. You don't take the dramatic step of shutting down the government unless you have a real strategy and it has a chance of working. It's never had a chance of working. We're now almost pushing Obamacare to the side, and we're talking about other issues, and people are still out of work, and the government is still shut down.
Congressman Graves, suicide caucus, kamikazes?
Still, as he indicated, we are unified behind the fairness of providing fairness and keeping the government open.
I know, it's the strategy at this point that has shut down the government.
But the reality is we are where we are right now. And as a conference, we have never been more united than what we have seen, particularly last Friday. We know that the president, his chief aides in the administration are saying, let it go. They don't care how long it goes on because they're winning. But this is not about who's going to win or lose, because it's the American people ultimately that are losing if we don't reach some sort of agreement. But you got to have Democrats willing to have a conversation.
Congressman Graves, one final area I want to get into with you. If House Speaker Boehner agrees to either reopen the government or to raise the debt ceiling without a deal that limits Obamacare, would you vote to remove him as Speaker?
There's no vote to remove him as Speaker. I mean, the next vote for Speaker is in January, I guess, of what, 2015?
You could vote to remove him. You could have a vote on the House floor.
What we're looking for right now, I mean, this is clear, Chris. We want to open up all the government that we can, but we want to provide fairness for the American people, and that is providing them the same protections that the President has provided big business, insurance companies, and members of Congress. There should be no special treatment, and all of America deserves that same fairness.
And briefly, Congressman King, less than a minute. Congressman Graves is not saying it, but there certainly are some members who have threatened if Boehner gives on this, he's gone.
No, I am absolutely committed to John Boehner. I think he's an outstanding speaker, doing the best he can under a terrible situation. He warned us a month ago that if we shut down the government because of defunding Obamacare, it was a no-win policy. John had to do it ultimately to keep the party together so we can have a chance of getting into negotiations. But I'm absolutely committed to John Boehner as being the Speaker. He's done an outstanding job considering what he's up against. He really has different factions within that conference, and nobody could do a better job than he could. As tough as it is, and maybe people have different opinions here and there. Obviously, I've had some disagreements, but never, ever with his ability to be the best Speaker we have.
Congressman King, Congressman Graves, thank you both.